In the rest of her life that was only a few months away, Anastasia met a neat-looking and stiff-looking man. Anastasia took him away to perform her wish list before her age ended, without knowing if she would fall in love with him, which made her confused whether she should tell the man the truth.
Moscow, in January, was a study in monochrome. The sky was steel gray, the concrete buildings were a dirty gray, and the streets were black sludge from melting. Snow mixed with the tracks of thousands of boots. Viktor Volkov blended perfectly with the landscape, wearing a black wool coat over a custom-tailored charcoal suit. He walked with a quick, efficient stride, cutting through the morning crowd on Tverskaya Street. In his right hand, he gripped a leather briefcase. In his left, a tumbler of hot black coffee that served as his only fuel this morning. He was 3 minutes behind schedule. 3 intolerable minutes. The meeting with a major real estate developer client was scheduled for 9 o'clock sharp, and Viktor was never late. He checked his watch, glancing up slightly to see the pedestrian crosswalk light flashing red. He quickened his pace, trying to cross before the light turned green for the cars. He didn't see her. On the corner, crouched near an ice-covered lamppost, was a splash of color that was out of place in Viktor's gray world. A girl, wearing a bright yellow knitted scarf so large it almost swallowed her face, was busy with something on the sidewalk. Viktor turned sharply at the corner, his eyes fixed on the office building across the street. The collision wasn't hard, but it was enough for a small disaster. Viktor stumbled, losing his balance for a moment. Reflexively, his hand swung out to steady himself. His tumbler's poorly secured lid popped off. Hot, jet black coffee spilled, not onto Viktor's suit, but directly onto the open sketchbook in the girl's lap.
Damn!
Viktor cursed more for his wasted expensive coffee than for running into someone. The girl yelped in surprise, jumping to her feet. The watercolor brush she had been holding fell into the snow. Viktor was ready, with his cold scolding about people blocking the public way, about inefficiency. He looked down, ready to intimidate. The words stuck in his throat. The girl was looking up at him. She had the brightest green eyes Viktor had ever seen, the color of new leaves in spring, which felt alien in the middle of this dead winter. Her nose was red from the cold, and there was a smudge of bright blue paint on her cheek. She looked at her sketchbook, now covered in dark brown coffee stains that ruined a delicate cityscape painting. Viktor waited for the angry shouts, demands for compensation, tears. Instead, the girl tilted her head, and then she laughed. It wasn't a cynical laugh. It was a genuine, light laugh that tinkled like wind chimes.
Well,
she said, her voice a little hoarse, but cheerful.
I suppose you've just added a dramatic element of realism to my painting, sir.
Viktor blinked, completely confused.
Pardon?
The girl picked up her sketchbook, tilting it to let the coffee drip off.
See, before it was just a boring Moscow. Now, it's a Moscow that woke up early and needs caffeine.
She looked up at Viktor and smiled widely, a smile that made her eyes crinkle.
I'm Anastasia,
she said, holding out a gloved hand, stained with colorful paint. Viktor stared at the hand as if it were a foreign object. He did not shake it.
I have to go,
he said stiffly, his professional mask snapping back into place.
My apologies for ruining your things. If you require compensation...
He started reaching for his wallet. Anastasia laughed again, waving her hand dismissively.
Save your money for a new coffee. You look like you need it more than I do.
She reached into her pocket and pulled out a cloth handkerchief, that was full of colorful paint stains. Chaotic, yet beautiful.
Here,
She said, pressing it into Victor's chest.
for the stain on your coat that you probably didn't notice.
Victor looked down. There was a small splash of coffee on his coat's lapel. He hadn't even felt it. Before Victor could say anything, Anastasia was already crouching back down, picking up her brush from the snow and starting to hum softly while trying to fix her painting with the remaining coffee. Victor stood there for 5 full seconds, highly inefficient seconds, staring at the strange girl in the yellow scarf. Then he turned and walked quickly toward his office. But for the first time in 10 years, he felt the world around him was a little less gray, and in his pocket, the colorful handkerchief felt strangely warm. That afternoon, Viktor Volkov didn't feel like himself. After the coffee incident that morning, his mind kept returning to the girl with the bright green eyes. It wasn't anger that dominated, but rather a melody, Anastasia's laugh, which tinkled like wind chimes, disturbing the logical silence in his mind. The colorful handkerchief in his coat's inner pocket felt like a strange, warm anomaly. Victor should have been focused on the project reports piled on his desk, but instead of numbers and graphs, he found himself imagining the smudge of blue paint on Anastasia's cheek, as if it were part of an interesting blueprint. The next day, for no clear reason, or perhaps there was, but Victor was too logical and rigid to admit it, he found himself back at that street corner. He reasoned that he wanted to compensate for the ruined sketch. Of course, it was the most rational excuse for the irrational act he was committing. Anastasia was already there. She wasn't painting today, but rather sitting on a snow-covered park bench. Her bright yellow scarf, a sharp contrast against the white snow around her. She was reading an old, leather-bound book, humming softly to herself. Every note that left her lips sounded like music Victor had never heard before. Victor approached, his steps slightly more hesitant than usual. He felt a strange flutter in his chest.
Anastasia?
The girl looked up, her green eyes immediately shining when she saw him.
Mr. Coffee, I thought you had returned to your important world.
Anastasia's light returning laugh made Victor's heart seem to stop for a moment, not out of panic, but from a strange, new, and pleasant thrill.
I want to compensate you for your sketchbook,
Victor said, pulling out his wallet.
How much was it?
Anastasia waved her hand.
Oh, that's not necessary. Besides, I already fixed it. Now it looks like expressive. Modern art.
She chuckled. Her chuckle was a melody that disturbed the silence of Victor's heart.
Besides, I'm not about money, sir. I'm about art and beauty.
Victor stared at her, feeling slightly awkward. He was fascinated by her unconventional beauty. By the way, the snow light reflected in her slightly messy dark brown hair, by the vitality that radiated from her every movement. Very well. In that case,
I'm Victor.
He extended his clean, formal hand. Anastasia smiled, then shook Victor's hand with her gloved hand, which was still slightly stained with paint. Her touch was warm and soft, so different from the professional handshakes Victor was used to. The touch sent a wave of warmth through Victor's arm, spreading through his entire body.
It's good to meet you again, Victor,
she said.
Why don't you sit? It's a beautiful day to watch the world.
Victor looked at the partially snow-covered bench. He had reports to finish. He had phone calls to make. He had a schedule. But for some reason, he found himself sitting down next to Anastasia. The distance between them was only a few centimeters, and Victor felt a strange warmth radiating from the girl, as if she were a source of heat in the middle of winter.
What did you do yesterday?
Victor asked, trying to start this inefficient conversation. His own voice sounded softer than he expected.
Painting. I painted the laughter of children in the park. Or maybe I painted the loneliness of an old man feeding pigeons. Or maybe I just painted the pattern of the passing clouds.
Anastasia answered, closing her eyes for a moment. Her face turned to the sky. Every word was poetry that Victor, the practical one, never knew he needed.
Life is like a great canvas, Victor. We just have to choose what we will paint on it.
Victor, whose life was always about solid buildings and straight lines, felt a little dizzy from the metaphor. But he didn't feel annoyed. Instead, he felt drawn in, wanting to know more about how such a beautiful mind worked.
Don't you have work?
Anastasia asked suddenly, opening her eyes. Her green eyes caught Victor's, and in that moment, Victor felt like he was looking into an untouched forest.
You seem like the type of person who has a minute-by-minute schedule.
I'm on sudden leave.
Victor lit. The lie felt strange, yet pleasant. Anastasia smiled.
Good, in that case, come with me. There's something you have to see.
Before Victor could protest, Anastasia was already on her feet and pulling his hand. She didn't give him a chance to refuse. And Victor, the man who always controlled every aspect of his life, led her. He let himself be pulled into uncertainty. She dragged Victor into a small, dark, narrow alley where a small crowd had gathered. In the middle of the crowd, a street musician with an old violin was playing a sad yet beautiful melody. Anastasia closed her eyes, letting the music flow into her. She began to move slowly, dancing without a care, her yellow scarf fluttering to the rhythm. Victor watched, transfixed by her wild elegance, by the freedom he had never felt himself. His heart was pounding, not from stress, but from an overflowing joy. Victor stood rooted, feeling extremely awkward. He never danced, not in public, not without a logical reason. He saw Anastasia, so free, so alive, and he knew, right there, in the middle of that narrow alley, he was starting to fall in love. He was falling in love with that laugh, with those lively eyes, with the beautiful chaos Anastasia brought into his world. He found himself smiling, not a polite, professional smile, but a genuine smile that forced its way out, warm and a little awkward. It was his first real smile in a very long time. When the music ended, Anastasia turned to Victor, her eyes sparkling.
See? Isn't it beautiful? Life isn't about schedules or spilled coffee, Victor. Life is about the small moments that make you feel alive.
Victor looked at her, and for the first time, he felt that he might have just met someone who could teach him how to live. And for the first time, he didn't mind one bit if his schedule was disrupted. He wanted more. He wanted to be a part of her colorful world. The following weeks passed in a dizzying, colorful haze for Victor. Moscow was still as cold and gray as usual, but Victor no longer noticed. His world had narrowed to the bright spots where Anastasia was. His personal assistant, Elena, began to look at him with confusion. Viktor Volkov, the man whose schedule was managed down to the second, was now often 10 minutes late. He sometimes smiled to himself while staring at building plans, and once Elena swore she saw her boss humming softly in the elevator.
Are you ill, Mr. Volkov?
Elena asked one morning when Victor canceled a lunch meeting for the third time that week.
No, Elena.
Victor replied, staring out his office window where the snow was falling slowly.
I think I'm just now getting well.
He wasn't having lunch with important clients. He was having lunch with Anastasia on a cold park bench, sharing warm piroshki stuffed buns bought from a street vendor. Anastasia was teaching him that rules were occasionally meant to be broken. One evening, when the temperature dropped to -20 degrees. Anastasia dragged him to an ice cream parlor that was about to close.
Ice cream? In this temperature?
Victor asked, skeptical but already smiling in resignation.
It's the best time.
Anastasia exclaimed, her eyes sparkling mischievously from behind her thick scarf.
In the summer, ice cream melts too fast. Now, we can enjoy it forever.
They sat in the fogged-up window, licking strawberry and chocolate ice cream while the world outside froze. Victor watched Anastasia laugh as she got cream on her nose. His heart felt warm, a full, urgent feeling in his chest. He wanted to freeze this moment, just like the ice cream. Another moment brought them to the rooftop of an old apartment building in the Arbat district. Anastasia somehow knew how to get the lock on the roof door open.
This is illegal.
Victor muttered, even as his feet continued to follow her.
Only if we get caught.
Anastasia retorted, pulling his hand. The view from up there was breathtaking. The lights of Moscow glittered below them like a carpet of diamonds on black velvet. The night wind was strong, whipping Anastasia's hair.
Look,
Anastasia said, pointing to the horizon.
from up here, all the problems look small, right? That big office building of yours just looks like a tiny Lego box.
Victor looked at the building where he had spent thousands of hours of his life. Anastasia was right. It looked insignificant from here. He turned to Anastasia. The city lights reflected in her green eyes. She looked so alive, so radiant, as if she herself were the energy source of the city.
Nastya.
He called softly. Anastasia turned, a smile still playing on her lips.
Yes, Vitya?
The familiar nickname Vita made Victor's stomach flutter. No one had called him that since his mother died.
Thank you.
He said.
For waking me up.
Anastasia's smile softened. She stood on her tiptoes slightly and kissed. Victor's cheek a touch as light as a snowflake, but as hot as fire. Just then, Anastasia's expression suddenly changed. Her smile vanished. She flinched, shutting her eyes tightly, one hand gripping her temple with a force that made her knuckles turn white. She swayed slightly. Victor caught her instantly.
Nastya? What's wrong?
Panic crept into Victor's voice. For several terrible seconds, Anastasia didn't answer. Her face was deathly pale, her breath held from the obvious pain. Then, as quickly as it came, the moment passed. Anastasia opened her eyes. She took a long, shaky breath, then forced a smile. The smile was a little cracked at the edges, not as bright as usual.
Brain freeze.
She said, trying to laugh, but it sounded hollow.
I guess we had too much ice cream earlier.
That wasn't a brain freeze, Nastya. You were in pain.
I'm fine, Vitya, really.
She straightened up, pulling away from Victor's embrace, though her hands were still trembling slightly as she adjusted her scarf.
Just a little dizzy. Maybe I need some sleep. Come on, take me home before we truly turn into popsicles up here.
She turned and walked toward the rooftop door, her steps a little too quick. As if she were running away from Victor's questions, Victor stood still for a moment on the cold rooftop. He watched Anastasia's retreating back. A cold unease crept into his heart, something his expensive wool coat couldn't warm. It was the first crack in the perfect painting they were creating, and Victor, with all his logic, chose to ignore the instinct telling him that something was wrong. Time passed from the piercing winter to the shy beginning of spring. The snow on the rooftops began to melt. And Victor felt the frost in his own heart had thawed completely. He had fallen in love, deeply and hopelessly. Anastasia had become his center of gravity. The invitation came in mid-March, an annual charity gala hosted by his architecture firm. It was a show-off event, cold, formal, and filled with people who measured success by the brand of their watch. Usually, Victor hated this event. But this year, he had a brilliant idea.
Will you be my date?
He asked Nastia one afternoon. Nastia's eyes widened.
2. Your important people party?
With all the stiff architects in expensive suits,
Precisely.
Victor said, smiling.
I want to make them a little jealous.
Nastia agreed, though she looked a little nervous. On the night of the gala, Victor picked up Nastia at her small but colorful apartment. He was wearing a classic black tuxedo. She opened the door, and the sight in front of him made him forget how to breathe. Nastia was wearing a vintage silk gown in emerald green, the exact same color as her eyes. The dress was simple, but on her, it looked more stunning than any designer gown in the room would later.
Vitya,
She asked, doing a little twirl.
is it strange?
You.
Victor swallowed, searching for the right word.
You are the only real thing in this world, Nastia.
He moved forward to help her with her coat, but Nastia was struggling with something on her feet.
Damn.
She muttered, laughing nervously as she sat on the edge of the bed.
I'm not used to wearing heels. My fingers are so stiff.
She was trying to fasten a small strap on her ankle, but her hand didn't seem to want to cooperate. Her fingers kept missing the clasp.
Here.
Victor said softly. He knelt in front of Nastia in the warm light of her apartment. Victor, the brilliant architect, patiently fastened the high heel strap on the ankle of the woman he loved. He looked up and smiled.
Perfect.
At the gala, the atmosphere was exactly as Victor remembered. Stiff, gray, and filled with quiet chatter about business and money. Then Anastasia entered, arm in arm with Victor. She was a splash of color in a monochrome room. All heads turned. The men stared with admiration. The women stared with judgment. Nastia, usually so confident, looked a little intimidated. She squeezed Victor's arm a little tighter.
Don't worry.
Victor whispered.
You are the most beautiful work of art in this room. They are all just sketches.
That made Nastia smile. A waiter approached them with a tray of champagne flutes. Victor took one, and Nastia took another.
To our first night in your gray world.
Nastia said, raising her glass for a toast.
And to how we're going to color it.
Victor replied, clinking his glass against hers. Nastia laughed that beautiful, tinkling laugh. She raised the glass to her lips, and that's when it happened. Nastia's hand began to shake. At first, it was just a small tremor, but then it became an uncontrollable vibration.
Nastia?
Victor asked, his smile vanishing. Nastia's eyes widened in horror. She stared at her own hand, as if it belonged to a stranger. She tried to steady it with her left hand, but it was too late. The champagne flute slipped from her grasp, hit the hard marble floor, and shattered into pieces. The golden liquid splashed onto her green dress and Victor's shoes. The music stopped. The chatter stopped. A total silence fell over the room as 100 pairs of eyes turned toward them. Nastia's face was deathly pale.
I'm sorry.
She whispered, her voice trembling violently.
My hand? I didn't mean to.
She looked at the stain on her dress, tears welling in her eyes. Victor didn't care about the stares. He didn't care about the broken glass or the spilled champagne. He only saw the terrified face of the woman he loved. In one smooth motion, he shrugged off his tuxedo jacket, draping it over Nastia's shoulders, both to cover her wet dress and to shield her from the stares.
Excuse us.
He said to the room, his voice calm but firm, breaking the silence. He gestured to a nearby waiter. Then he turned, wrapping his arm around Nastia's trembling waist.
Let's get out of here.
He whispered softly. In the car on the way home, Nastia sobbed uncontrollably on Victor's shoulder.
I ruined your night, Vitya. I'm so embarrassed.
She sobbed.
I don't know what happened. I was just so nervous. That's all. It must have just been nerves.
Victor held her tightly, kissing the top of her head. He felt that cold fear in his heart. Same fear from the rooftop, but he pushed it far, far away.
Sheesh.
His
I hated that party. You were the best thing there.
He chose to believe her. He chose to believe it was just nerves, because the alternative, that there was something truly wrong with the colorful girl who had brought his world to life, was too terrifying to even consider. Spring arrived in Moscow in a hurry, as if wanting to make up for the dark and long winter. The melting snow was replaced by green buds, and in Gorky Park, the sakura cherry blossom trees exploded in a flurry of soft pink and white. For Victor, this spring felt like a true awakening. The incident at the gala several weeks ago, he had buried deep. He convinced himself it was just a combination of nervousness and exhaustion. His logic had surrendered. He no longer analyzed Anastasia. He just loved her. He loved her beautiful chaos, her infectious laugh, and the way she forced him to feel. He knew what he had to do. A structured life without Anastasia now seemed inefficient and unthinkable. He planned the day meticulously at a very Victoria action, but with a very Anastasia goal. A simple picnic under the canopy of the fully blooming sakura trees. Anastasia looked exceptionally beautiful that day. She wore a simple pale yellow cotton dress that fluttered in the gentle breeze, but there was a new fragility about her. She looked pale, and the faint dark circles under her eyes couldn't be completely covered by her bright smile.
Vitya, this is perfect.
Nastia whispered, resting her head on Victor's shoulder as they sat on the blanket.
I feel like I'm inside a painting.
Victor felt his heart pound, a sensation he was now beginning to recognize. It was time. He shifted slowly, taking both of Nastia's hands. They felt cold, even though the air was warm.
Nastia,
he said, his voice more serious than he intended.
you were right when we first met. I was just living in a gray world. I built big buildings, but I wasn't building a life.
Nastia's green eyes looked at him, starting to well up as if she knew what was coming.
Then you came.
Victor continued.
With paint on your face, your silly yellow scarf, and your laugh. You colored my world, Nastia. You are the most real thing I have ever had.
Victor shifted from his seat, kneeling on the soft grass. The act felt foreign to his stiff body, yet it felt perfectly right. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket.
I don't want to go back to that gray world. I want to live in your colorful world. Forever. Anastasia, will you marry me?
Tears flowed freely down Nastia's cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of a pure, painful happiness.
Yes.
She whispered, her voice breaking.
Yes, Vitya. Of course, yes.
She pulled Victor to his feet to hug him. Victor lifted her and spun her around. Their laughter, mixing under the falling petals. This was the peak of their happiness. This was their perfect moment. And that's when it all ended. Nestia's body suddenly went rigid in Victor's arms. Her laughter stopped. Her smile froze.
Nastya?
Victor called the happiness on his face changing to confusion, then terror. In a split second, Nastia's eyes rolled into the back of her head. She didn't answer. Her body began to convulse violently in Victor's arms.
No, Nastya.
Victor held her tightly, lowering her frantically onto the soft picnic blanket so she wouldn't get hurt. He didn't know what to do.
Help!
He shouted at the startled onlookers in the park.
Please call an ambulance. Now.
The beautiful pink sakura petals continued to fall like snow, landing on Nastia's pale yellow dress as she now lay stiff, while Victor could only hold tightly onto the love of his life, who was being forcibly ripped away from him.